Fear isn't just a reaction, it's a survival tool honed over millennia. But what happens when fear no longer protects us, when it becomes the very thing that hunts us? Scientists call it hypervigilance, an overactive fear response that distorts reality, making shadows seem alive and whispers unbearable. For Jacob and Elias, hypervigilance isn't just a symptom. It's the beginning of something far darker. Jacob stood frozen in the darkness of his cabin. The note, with its ominous question, still rested on his desk. But the knock, soft yet deliberate, reverberated through the room again. This time it was followed by a faint voice, muffled by the storm outside. "Jacob, let me in." His pulse quickened. The voice was familiar, yet it carried an unnatural resonance, like two people speaking in unison. He backed away from the door, gripping Elias's journal tightly in his hand. "Who's there?" Jacob's voice cracked as he shouted over the wind. The storm swallowed his words, and silence followed. Then the door handle turned. Elias sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the cracked mirror propped against the wall. The reflection was still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him through the glass. The faint whisper returned, crawling through the room like a distant breeze. "What do you fear most?" He tried to focus on the file in front of him. A missing woman, Alice Marlowe. She'd vanished 2 days after visiting the same apartment where the strange mirror had been found. Her last known words, recorded in a journal, were hauntingly familiar. "I see it everywhere. The reflection isn't mine." Elias clenched his fists. He needed answers, and he knew where to start. The woman's last known location was an abandoned tenement on the edge of town, a place the locals called the Watcher's House. The cabin's door creaked open, revealing only the storm. Snow blew inside, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into near-total darkness. Jacob stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching on the icy floorboards. The wind howled, carrying faint whispers that seemed to echo from every direction. As he peered outside, the forest stretched endlessly before him, a labyrinth of shadows and snow. And then he saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, motionless, its form barely visible against the blizzard. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. The figure raised an arm slowly, pointing toward him. The journal in his hand grew heavier, the leather binding almost pulsing with heat. He stumbled back inside, slamming the door shut. "What is happening to me?" Jacob whispered to himself, his voice trembling. The tenement building was as cold and desolate as Elias had expected. Snow had piled against the boarded-up windows, and the front door hung loosely on its hinges. He stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air was thick with decay, and the faint scent of burned wood lingered. Elias moved carefully, his gun drawn. Each creak of the floorboards echoed through the empty halls. On the second floor, he found the room Alice had been staying in. The door was ajar, revealing a sparse, unkempt space. A shattered mirror lay on the floor, its shards arranged in an almost deliberate pattern. In the center was a single word scratched into the wood: Watcher. Elias knelt to examine the shards. His reflection stared back at him from each fragment, but as he reached out to touch one, the pieces began to tremble. The whispers grew louder, filling the room. "What do you fear most?" Elias turned sharply, his gun raised. The room was empty, but the whispers persisted, growing closer. Back in the cabin, Jacob sat at his desk, his hands trembling as he opened the journal. The words on the next page were scrawled hastily, almost illegible. December 25th, 1949, Elias's journal. I saw it. The Watcher. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. It moves through the mirrors, through the shadows. It knows me. And it's waiting. If anyone reads this, destroy the glass. Destroy it before it's too late. Jacob's heart raced. The Watcher. The figure in the storm. The whispers. They were all connected. He glanced at the small mirror hanging on the wall of the cabin. Its surface seemed darker now, almost liquid. He grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror, his breathing shallow, but as he turned away, he heard the faint sound of glass cracking. Elias moved to leave the tenement, but the hallway stretched unnaturally before him. The walls seemed to ripple, and the faint glow of mirrors reflected distorted images of him as he walked. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the end of the hall. It grew larger, taking on a humanoid shape with elongated limbs and hollow, glowing eyes. Elias fired his gun, the shots echoing endlessly, but the figure didn't stop. It whispered as it approached, its voice like wind through broken glass. "You cannot escape." The storm outside Jacob's cabin reached a fever pitch, the wind howling like a beast. The blanket covering the mirror was ripped away by an unseen force, revealing the Watcher's face, staring back at him. Its eyes locked onto Jacob's, and a sharp pain shot through his head. The journal fell to the floor, its pages flipping wildly until they settled on a blank page. Slowly, words began to appear, written in an invisible hand. "You invited me in." Jacob screamed as the mirror shattered, shards flying across the room. Each fragment reflected the Watcher, its form multiplying as the whispers grew deafening. Fear feeds on the unknown, growing stronger with every shadow, every whisper. Jacob and Elias are no longer just observers. They are prey, and the Watcher will not stop until it has consumed them both. Join us for episode 6 of Shadows of the Mind, where the truth behind the Watcher and its connection to Jacob and Elias begins to unravel. Until then, ask yourself, what do you fear the most?